Hello, and in this video about the band descriptors, I'm going to focus on lexical resource. Now you might find this video slightly longer than the others and wonder why. Well, in my personal experience, I've found that students with the better vocabulary are the ones who get the better grades. And you might think, well, why is that? Because lexical resource is only 25% of your overall band score. But I think if you have a great and varied vocabulary, you can trick the IELTS examiner into thinking that your grammar is better than it actually is. Whereas if you're good at grammar and maybe fluency and coherence, but you're lacking the vocabulary, then it's much harder to trick them. And also when you have a greater vocabulary, you have more to say, so you're more likely to be using more things that will add to your grammar grade and your fluency and coherence and your pronunciation grade. So this is why I see this band as the most important one in all of the 4 bands. So let's take a look at what the band descriptors say. So uses vocabulary resource flexibly to discuss a variety of topics. That means that you have a large vocabulary. Uses some less common and idiomatic vocabulary and shows some awareness of style and collocation. This is about idiomatic vocabulary and collocation, which we'll look at in this video, and uses paraphrase effectively. What paraphrase means is saying the same thing but differently, so using different words to describe things, and we'll take a look at that as well in this video. So first of all, using paraphrase effectively. So if we look at this example, my hometown is nice, it's big and very nice, I really like it. There's a lot of repetition, it's very bad vocabulary as well, it's very basic, it's about IELTS 4. What you need to be able to do is have a large vocabulary so you can use lots of different words. So for example, this topic which is about hometown, being able to use words like stunning, awe-inspiring, marvellous, a view to die for, awesome, breathtaking, stunningly beautiful, incredible, spectacular. These are all synonyms of nice when we're describing hometowns, and so you're showing the IELTS examiner that you can use paraphrase effectively. And as you go through this course, there are loads of examples that I give you of words that you can use instead of more basic words. I'm going to look at another example of this. There are a lot of questions in IELTS do you agree that, and say, do you agree that living in the city is better than living in the countryside? And you might answer, yes, I agree that living in a city is better than living in the countryside. But you're just repeating words from the question, I agree. Now, there are lots of different ways how you can say agree or disagree. So, I couldn't agree more. I completely agree. Or, I wholeheartedly agree. I totally agree. Then when you're saying how much you agree, I agree to a great extent. I agree to a large extent. Slightly less strong, I agree to some extent. I partly agree. And if you disagree, I completely disagree. I disagree entirely. So it's worthwhile learning these phrases, and they're very useful for IELTS writing as well, because often there's talk about do you agree or disagree with something. I think another way in which you can expand your lexical resource, your vocabulary, is avoid using the word very. It's a word that we use hundreds of times a day. As a native speaker of English, I'll be using it all the time. The IELTS exam is not like a real environment. You have to try and throw in as much vocabulary as you can and try and show that you have this great range of vocabulary. So, for example, the facilities in my hometown are incredibly good. Eating in restaurants in major cities is terribly expensive. It gets extremely hot in my hometown in the summer. The food that I had during that meal was exceedingly good. I'm generally awfully bad at sports, but I'm an okay swimmer. Lionel Messi is a remarkably good footballer. The reason why this book was especially interesting is that I'm not particularly good at managing my time. So all of these are different ways of saying very. Now you need to practice, because you're not going to think of these in the exam without having practiced saying some things. So try to use them in your preparation. Now there may be times during the exam when you don't know the answer, but instead of just saying I don't know, think of different ways to say it. So do you know how to make a cake? I'm not entirely sure how to make a cake because, to be honest, it's not something I've ever done before. I suppose you need eggs, flour, butter and sugar, and they are mixed together. Other than that, I don't really know. So I'm not entirely sure. Why do you think rich people like to eat special foods? I'm not sure how to answer that. It's not something I've ever thought about before. I guess they can afford special food and it tastes good. As I'm not a particularly wealthy person myself, it's hard for me to say. So notice I've said not particularly wealthy, so I'm not very wealthy, particularly wealthy. How has the food we eat changed in the last 50 years? It's hard to say because I'm not particularly interested in food, so it's not something I've given much thought to. I imagine it's not as healthy as before, but I can't really give examples of how or why. So you can see these answers are much more complex, and we haven't just used simple language like I don't know. Moving on now to look at collocations. These are essential in IELTS. A lot of IELTS candidates learn words, single words. That is not enough. You must focus on learning collocations, and throughout the course I point out loads of them. There's hundreds of them. Collocations are words that we put together and use in a particular way. For example, we say make a cake, but do your homework. And knowing the right collocations gets you higher band scores. Knowing complex collocations like this gets you even higher band scores. So let's take a look. To be snowed under with. This is an idiomatic expression, but it's also a collocation, and it means you have lots of things to do. For example, I'm snowed under with work at the moment, so I don't go to the cinema much. A distant memory. This is something you cannot remember very well because it happened a long time ago. I have a distant memory of wanting to be a doctor when I was young. Vitally important. It's vitally important that you use lots of collocations. Vitally important means very important. Being able to use a computer is vitally important in this day and age. A vivid memory. This is a very strong, clear memory. Something you remember very clearly. So I have a vivid memory of visiting the museum on a school trip when I was in high school. And a great one that's really useful, to think long and hard about something, and this means to consider something for a long time. I thought long and hard about going abroad to study. I don't know what I'm going to do in the future. I need to think long and hard about it. So these are some great collocations. As you go through the course, try and learn some that you think would be most useful for you and try and include them in your IELTS exam. It's more about collocations than individual words. Finally, I want to look at some idioms, and I'm going to focus on idioms to describe people because people are included in lots of part 2 topics, and so knowing some idioms to describe people is vitally important. A quick tip: focus on language in your IELTS exam. Do not focus on facts. Do not spend time describing the person you know accurately. Think of complex language and say that the person is like this. So if you're describing your father and he is tall and he's a quiet person, don't say it. Just think of all the complex idioms that you know, the complex collocations, and describe him as this. It's not a truth or lie test. It's about language. So let's take a look. To be a people person. This is somebody who's very good with people. So one of the reasons why he's so successful is that he is a people person. To be head and shoulders above the rest. This means to be much better than everybody else. In the world of football, he is head and shoulders above the rest. So if you were talking about Ronaldo or Messi or Harry Kane, whoever it might be, a person you know, just somebody who's much better than everybody else. To be a charismatic leader, this is someone who has an engaging persona. It is vitally important to be a charismatic leader and not just a good organiser of people. To be full of beans, this means you're full of energy. My friend is always full of beans day and night. You might talk about yourself and say, oh, I'm not a morning person. I'm not full of beans when I wake up. To be the life and soul of the party. This means to like having fun. I wouldn't describe myself as the life and soul of the party, as I'm quite a shy person. So notice that I use these as a negative, not just positive. So in your 1 minute preparation, if you're describing a person, get the idioms down, get the collocations down, and then just use them. Use them as negative. He's not a people person. He is a people person. Remember, it's about language. It's not truth. Nobody's going to check whether your father is full of beans in the morning. But you are going to get higher band scores if you use this kind of vocabulary. Throughout the course, there are loads of these, so I recommend that you watch each video, watch them a few times, to just try and get some of these words and phrases into your head. Thanks for watching.